Hello, my name is Mark Gibson, and you're listening to the podcast version of the Teagasc Signpost Series, a weekly webinar that promotes and examines sustainability in Irish farming.
Morning to you all, and you're welcome to this morning's Signpost webinar. This webinar is brought to you by Teagasc in association with Dairy Sustainability Ireland, the National Rural Network and Food Drink Ireland. My name is Pat Murphy, Head of Environment Knowledge Transfer with Teagasc, sitting in for Mark Gibson while he takes some well-earned leave. I'm joined this morning by Catherine Keena, Countryside Management Specialist with Teagasc. She will be handling the questions. Catherine, you're welcome.
Good morning from Teagasc Dalton, Pat.
It's timely that we're joined by our guest today. Fergal Monaghan is Project Manager with the Hen Harrier Project. Good morning, Fergal.
Good morning, Pat.
We think we're heading for some consultation process in relation to the agri-environment climate schemes over the next week or so.
Yeah, I understand the public consultation is imminent. It's a very exciting period, and I hope it's the beginning of an agri-environment climate measure with more ambition to deliver for the challenges that we face.
You've been managing the the Hen Harrier project now for a number of years.
Yeah, Pat, I was a farm advisor for 22 years before that. I spent a lot of time working in upland areas, particularly in Connemara and around the west of Ireland. But we've been running the Hen Harrier project since 2017. It's a pilot project, but it's quite large in scale. It is a budget of 25 million. We now deal with 1,500 farmers and close to 40,000 hectares of land. So I think one of the most important things we've learned in it is that it's feasible to take this approach at scale. And I think it has a lot to offer in informing the next CAP.
Okay, well, without further ado, your presentation, I think, should give us some insights into the learnings you've had over a period of years and the potential impact that might have, or the potential implications of that for agri-environmental schemes. So if you want to share your screen, and we'll fire ahead with your presentation.
I would like to divide this talk into two parts. First, I would like to talk about the two large EIPs in the current CAP, the challenges they faced and the solutions that they helped to develop. And secondly, I would like to offer my views on how the lessons learned in these projects can inform the rollout of the next Rural Development Programme. Ireland's current RDP introduced the European Innovation Partnership Model to support the delivery of ecosystem services. Two large EIPs, the Hen Harrier Project and the Freshwater Pearl Mussel Project, used the flexibility of the EIP model to develop landscape level and results-based approaches to the conservation of two flagship species. I believe they were quite successful in this, not least because they were able to demonstrate that such an approach can be delivered at scale. The current CAP is now coming to an end, and the model pioneered in these two projects and in the Burren programme will see more widespread use in its successor. The Hen Harrier and Freshwater Pearl Mussel projects were species focused, in one case on a bird and in the other on a freshwater mollusk. As animal species go, these two are very different, and it might appear that conservation efforts directed at them would have very little in common. This is not the case. The common thread connecting these two species is that both are impacted by the characteristics and condition of the wider landscape. Why is this important? The freshwater pearl mussel and the hen harrier provide good examples of not only why action at the landscape level is needed, but also of the range of ecosystem services the conservation efforts directed at these high-level indicator species can deliver. These include co-benefits for other species, for habitats, for water quality, for flood and wildfire resilience, and for carbon capture and storage. But there is another way of looking at this. It is the delivery of these ecosystem services that enables the conservation of those flagship species. While local priorities will always dictate some tailoring of programs at key locations and for specific objectives, it is the restoration of high quality functional habitats that is the key requirement to meet the challenges we face. Species diverse grasslands, good quality peatlands, clean water in streams and river catchments with near normal flow characteristics will deliver for biodiversity, for water quality, climate adaptation and mitigation, and these should be our goals. The freshwater pearl mussel is dependent on suitable substrates in which to grow, clean gravel, not choked by silt or smothered in algae. It needs a suitable and reliable flow of water in the streams and rivers it inhabits. It needs channels that do not dry up in dry weather and a healthy population of trout or salmon to host its larvae. All of these requirements are dependent on conditions across the entire catchment. Inevitably, this includes many farms and other land users. The erosion of peat or soil upstream can lead to the deposition of silt in gravel beds, potentially cutting off the supply of oxygen to young mussels. The loss of plant nutrients to water can lead to excessive growth of algae, smothering the mussel's habitat. Drainage, erosion, or soil compaction can change the flow characteristics of watercourses, making them more vulnerable to summer droughts and to flash floods following intense rainfall events. Barriers to fish migration can impact the movement of trout or salmon and prevent the freshwater pearl mussel from completing its life cycle. All of this means that efforts at conserving the species must engage at the catchment level. To be successful, they need to integrate environmental action by farmers with addressing the pressures arising from forestry practices, land drainage, flood control, road and bridge repairs, and fisheries management. For freshwater pearl mussels, limiting action to individual farms or even selected fields within those farms is doomed to fail. In most cases, the bulk of the problems are coming from relatively small, discrete areas. A voluntary, results-based approach can incentivize the farmer to address these, but that may not be enough. Some problems are just too challenging, too complex, or exist at too great a scale to expect a farmer in a basic agri-environment contract to deal with. Extra support, both financial and technical, is needed. Without this focused effort, the spend on agri-environment measures will underachieve. While the average quality of farmland habitat may be improved, the problems at the critical sites that have the greatest impact on the wider catchment go unaddressed. Likewise for the hen harrier, effective conservation action also requires us to look beyond the farm gate. We must ensure that at a population level, the species' basic requirements are met. Hen harriers need safe nesting and roosting habitats, an adequate supply of prey, and protection from excessive nest predation and disturbance. Let's look at the species requirements through the year, the pressures they face, and how these pressures can be eased. The birds return to the uplands in March. They form pairs, establish territories, and build a nest. The critical requirements at this time of the year are suitable nesting habitats, ideally tall heather or scrub. The pressures that impact on the species at this stage are not only those that affect the availability of these habitats, but also those that may deter the birds from utilizing them, or those that expose them to disturbance or predation. At this stage, the birds have not yet invested in egg laying or rearing chicks, and they are easily spooked, often abandoning an otherwise suitable territory. Tree felling, the use of machinery or off-road vehicles, wildfires, free-ranging dogs, or people approaching the nest can all frighten them off. Forestry plantations can lead to an increased vulnerability to predation, possibly creating ecological traps where nest failure rates later in the breeding season are likely to be very high. So it is not enough to say to the farmer that you should allow more scrub to develop. Of course we need more scrub, but to achieve this we need to facilitate it through reform of the rules governing land eligibility for direct payments. Addressing the risk of disturbance demands engagement with other stakeholders, in particular those involved with forestry, the wind energy industry, and recreational users. Reducing the vulnerability to predators requires coordinated action on different farms and on forested lands to minimize the interface between forestry and open landscapes. Mitigating the wildfire risk needs management that creates a less vulnerable landscape, one where fuel species like Millennia or gorse are not dominant over large areas. This requires active management that farmers are well placed to deliver. It requires grazing by the right animal at the right place at the right time. For example, mature cattle grazing Millennia in June and July, or horses browsing on gorse in February. Grazing solutions supplemented by targeted rewetting and strategic planting of broadleaf trees can provide habitats, facilitate the storage of carbon in soils, and reduce the risk from flooding and fire. The outputs of such a system are different. They are not as obvious as beef or lamb. Livestock products will certainly be an output of this system, but perhaps not the dominant one. The really valuable output will be a more resilient landscape, one that helps address the biodiversity and climate crises. This style of management may not always be economically optimal, but it is key to attaining greater resilience to climate change in an upland setting. As the summer progresses, the risk of disturbance continues to be a pressure, but the availability of prey becomes increasingly critical. After the chicks hatch, they grow fast and their demands for food are enormous. If the adults are to supply this, they need an abundant supply of prey in a landscape that suits their hunting technique. To understand the scale of the challenge they face, we should consider that the male bird has to feed the female while she is sitting on eggs. Obviously, he has to feed himself as well, so he is hunting for two. When the eggs hatch, he has to provide for himself, the female, and possibly up to 5 chicks. The demands are huge as the growth of young chicks is very fast, going from an egg a little smaller than a hen's egg to adult size in 6 weeks. This needs a steady and spectacular supply of food. The female will help as the chicks get bigger, but her absence hunting increases the risk to chicks from inclement weather and from predators. For all of these reasons, it is important that adults can source adequate prey as close to the nest as possible, and that needs quality habitats that support high densities of prey species. Agriculture can really help with this. But habitat quality is not the only issue. In a fragmented landscape like the Hen Harrier SPAs, where more than 50% of the land is forested, hen harriers often have to travel too far to find their prey. So if prey is lacking, or if the commute is too long, the supply of food to the chicks can suffer. In the fiercely competitive environment of a hungry nest, the smallest and weakest can rapidly succumb. The result, a clutch of 4 chicks becomes 3, then 2, then 1. Coordinated action by farmers to improve habitats and to support higher prey densities can partially address this problem. The issue of food supply for young chicks is intrinsically linked to the food supply further down the food chain. Prey species like meadow pipits have to raise chicks too, and they need an abundant supply of insects. Insect numbers are falling in many parts of the world. In Ireland, this decline is not just linked to the use of insecticides, but also to the loss of diversity in our landscapes. Large areas are becoming increasingly homogeneous. The loss of hedges, the draining of ponds, the expansion of monocultures of conifers or perennial ryegrass, excessive dominance of hillsides by bracken or millennia, the shift to single enterprise farming units. All of these are narrowing the base of the trophic pyramid, slashing the opportunities for insects, and with that, the productivity of much of the rest of the ecosystem. Addressing this is where the results-based element can really help. Farmers know how to farm, and if they are incentivized and supported to deliver improved habitats, they can do it. Increasing diversity at every level in the food chain builds in resilience to external shocks and supports the transfer of energy from plants all the way to a specialist predator like the hen harrier. For hen harriers, we need to be able to prioritize the delivery of outcomes where they will be most beneficial. For example, promoting the development of scrub, especially in areas remote from forestry plantations. This is a real challenge in the SPAs where there is hardly anywhere less than 500 metres from a forested site. We need to increase not just the area of suitable habitat, but also the connectivity between habitats and achieve a reduction in the length of the interface between forestry and open terrain. Achieving this requires a managed retreat from forestry as a land use at certain locations. This will require meaningful engagement with the industry. This does not appear to have happened to date. Another example is the provision of small patches of tillage or wild bird cover crops. While this is a benefit anywhere, ensuring that these patches are widely distributed maximizes their impact on the heterogeneity and productivity of the landscape. This year, farmers in the Hen Harrier project will deliver 30 kilometres of wild bird cover strips, up from 400 metres in 2019, an increase of 7,500%. The essential step in achieving this was convincing farmers that this step was worthwhile and that it was possible, and that the supports, financial and technical, were there to support them. Action to address other environmental priorities, be they the conservation of habitats or individual species, or the protection of water quality, or adapting to a changing climate, will need intervention at the landscape scale as well. But when we talk about landscape level action, we need to be clear what we really mean by this. What is a landscape level action? I believe that we can categorize landscape level actions as follows. First, actions which have a beneficial effect beyond the farm. For example, the restoration of a peatland, preventing carbon loss to the atmosphere and moderating the flow of downslope streams and rivers. Or the provision of wild bird cover, which supports birds from across the landscape at certain times of the year. Second, actions where coordination between different farmers or between farmers and other stakeholders is necessary. This includes measures to increase the wildfire resilience of habitats at key control points in the landscape. To be effective, such a plan requires action at multiple sites and needs the input of farmers, foresters, the fire services, and conservation interests. For example, as you can see on the slide, in West Limerick, there are effectively no ponds or lakes available as water sources for helicopters engaged in firefighting. This can be addressed by the strategic location of fire ponds on suitable sites on participating farms. Actions which require cooperation between groups of farmers if they are to be fully effective. For example, on commonages, where delivery of improved grazing management may require supporting infrastructure and management of the number and type of animals and the spatial and seasonal focus of grazing. Fourth, community level action. These are actions or payments to engage the rural farmer, the rural community, to give farmers a stake in the value of what they achieve. For example, the Hen Harrier Nest Bonus, where farmers are recognised and rewarded for local nests. This was a measure that accounted for less than 10% of the Hen Harrier Project budget, but has dramatically improved the public perception of the species in SPA areas. And finally, project level actions such as monitoring or planning, for example, the production of landscape fire plans. These are required to support and inform the delivery of actions elsewhere. So how do we restructure the delivery and rollout of agri-environment schemes to incorporate not just a farm level results-based element, but also the delivery of landscape level interventions? I believe that we need to start with a clear definition of what our priorities are, how these vary across different landscapes, and on how they interact with farming practices and other land users. This means that one of our first tasks must be the production of local area plans for Menu B areas. For the most part, logic dictates that these are based on river catchments. I see these plans identifying the local priorities, whether they are the conservation of key habitats or species, or action directed at securing carbon stocks or climate adaptation, or helping the landscape and stakeholders become more resilient to the growing threats from climate change, like wildfires or flooding. This plan will determine the training needs for farmers, for farm advisors, for project teams, and for Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine staff. It will also identify the skill sets that will be required in the individual project teams working in these landscapes. The plan will also need to determine the monitoring and planning required to support the delivery of landscape level interventions and on the methodology for delivering these. This is a big challenge and the window for completing it will be short. To be successful, it will need engagement with the full suite of stakeholders: DAFM, farm advisors, MPWS, forestry interests, local authorities, and most of all with the farming community. In parallel with this initial local planning phase, we need to ensure that the infrastructure and supports required at national level are put in place. We need to consider how the farmer, the farm advisor, and the project team interact with each other, with the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine, and with other stakeholders, particularly state agencies like the EPA, NPWS, and local authorities. What will be required in future agri-environment schemes will be a big ask for farmers. Outside of the Burren and freshwater pearl mussel catchments and the Hen Harrier SPAs, most farmers have little experience of results-based projects or landscape level actions. The new local teams will need to embark on a considerable outreach programme in 2022 to raise awareness and to involve farmers in the production of a local area plan. Considering the fundamental change of direction, the transition from a prescription-based to a results-based agri-environment scheme, a certain amount of hesitancy from some in the farming community is to be expected. To address this, we need to engage farmers early, particularly the early adopters, to support the rollout of the programme in Menu B areas. Many people are naturally risk averse. Farmers are no different. They need the reassurance of positive reports from early adopters, particularly from trusted friends and neighbours. These people from within their own community have far more influence on them than any farm advisor, DAFM official or politician. We need to engage them early. We need their help. There is a pressing need to remove barriers to entry that may exist. Agri-environment schemes need to be easy to access. We cannot go on with a system where a farmer's first experience of an agri-environment scheme is a bill from their advisor. There is a real need to ensure that the application process is efficient and fair, the programs are accessible, and that the farmer is not hit with upfront costs before they have a contract. In the Hen Harrier project, we used a simple one-page expression of interest with just the farmer's name, address, and herd number. There was no need for a plan to be produced in advance, and there was no cost attached to the application process. I believe that a similar approach could and should be used in the agri-environment schemes of the future. We also need to look at the constraints that advisors and farmers will face in the delivery of a new programme. For the farmer, the land eligibility problem has to be dealt with once and for all. We need to keep the application process simple, and we need to support the farmer in delivering for the future. The new structures that will be put in place must consider the impact of their decisions on farmers. The new procedures must not load the farmer or the advisor with additional tasks just to ease the admin burden elsewhere. Ultimately, the farmer will have to do most of the work. He is at the sharp end, and he is the one from whom the greatest ask is being made. Other stakeholders should remember this. For advisors, this means recognizing the huge amount of work involved in assessing tens of thousands of fields in a 2 or 3 month assessment season. If this is to be achieved, the advisor will need a significant amount of training, much greater than anything provided to them in the past. They will also need the ability to draw on technical support when and where they require it. We need to ensure the optimal use is made of the advisor's time. This means getting them out of the office and onto the farm, and it means giving him or her the tools they need to do the job. But the role of advisors has to change. the advisor has to become closer to the core of the project. At present, the advisor provides a service to the farmer. That's it. This is an underutilization of a valuable store of local knowledge. The good, committed, conscientious advisor must be enabled to contribute to delivering solutions at a local level as well as at the farm level. They must be seen as partners in a joint enterprise. We must invest in their training and continuous professional development, but we must also insist on high standards. There are still too many who, because of habit or training, have the wrong mindset for this work. If they cannot change, they must be encouraged to move on. The apps developed by the Hen Harrier Project and the Freshwater Pearl Mussel Project made those projects feasible. We could not have assessed 16,000 fields annually in the Hen Harrier Programme if advisors had to take notes in the field and then go back to the office and do a data entry job. Developing a suitable app to keep the advisors doing high value work was not a choice, it was a necessity. Farm advisors, local project teams and the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine itself are there to enable the farmer, to incentivize the farmer, to help the farmer deliver the objectives we all seek to achieve. It is their role to support the farmer, not the other way around. Appropriate non-productive investments that enable the farmer to do better will have a key role. The effective rollout of these non-productive investments will require screening to ensure that they are appropriate. We cannot separate this out and say that it is a planning issue, a local authority problem, or an NPWS issue. If they impact on agriculture and the environment, then they are an agricultural issue, and mechanisms to smooth their approval and delivery will be needed. In the Hen Harrier Project, we developed tools that integrated LIPIS data with information from Hen Harrier monitoring, from field assessments, along with spatial data on water quality from the EPA, Natura 2000 data from NPWS, and information on our archaeological heritage into a decision-making tool. This supported the consideration and approval of over 3,000 actions a year. We have to start treating data as a resource and use it to inform planning, the targeting of training, and the identification of needs and solutions to local challenges. An example of this coordination can operate. The Hen Harrier Project used field assessment data to identify fields where Japanese knotweed was recorded. Clusters of these fields were identified and the farmers affected and their advisors provided with specialist training. The use of data in this manner to target the delivery of training and other supports to where they are needed is going to be vital. Tools like these are essential going forward, and they will require a paradigm shift in how we treat the data arising from the operation of agri-environment schemes. It is no longer just about compliance and calculating payments and penalties. In the future, data is the resource that enables us to achieve our goals. The Menu B areas are larger and contain a wider variety of priorities than existed in the Hen Harrier SPAs. As a consequence, the rules within these databases will be more complex than the Hen Harrier Project faced. Their development will be more challenging and the training needs for end users will be much greater. But developing these tools is not a choice. It is an absolutely essential basic requirement, and we need to start very soon if we are to be ready on time. The local teams are a vital link in the implementation of new higher ambition agri-environment schemes. Their role is to support the farmer and the farm advisor, to lead, to demonstrate, to train. But they must be solutions focused, both at a programme level and at the farm level. They must be enablers that assist the other actors to achieve our shared objectives. The role will be challenging, but I believe it will be exciting and fulfilling. It is a role that we must be able to attract our brightest and best to fill. But we need to plan how these local teams are going to be structured, how their staff will be recruited and trained, what skill sets those staff should have, and how specialist supports for them can be put in place. We need to consider how the local teams interact with other agencies such as NPWS, EPA, and LawPro. We have to address the challenges created by scale. This approach is ambitious, and that means reaching out to thousands of farmers. That will require a devolved local structure, one where the local project officer works closely with local farm advisors, with leaders in the local farming community, the local NPWS conservation ranger, and specialists within the larger project team to identify and address local needs. Solving all of these problems is going to be a complex task. It is going to need careful planning. As we approach the start of the next CAP, we need to ensure that we are as well prepared as possible. We need to ensure that the basic infrastructure is in place and that everyone involved is as prepared as possible. The CAP strategic plan is the essential first step, but we must now look beyond that. The success or failure of the new approach will depend on how effectively we use the preparatory phase in 2022. The changes involved in addressing the biodiversity and climate crises are systemic. They will impact on everyone involved. They will affect how the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine, how farm advisors, and most importantly, how farmers go about their work. What agriculture as a community, as an industry, what we as a society are about to embark on holds a lot of promise. I believe we have an opportunity now to address the many challenges that we face. And yes, I believe it can work. I'm excited by it, but I know it will require changing everything about how we look at our respective roles, how we work and cooperate with each other. It can be done, but we need to be ready and willing to get it done, and we need to start straight away. Okay.
Thanks very much, Fergal.
Okay.
If you'd just stop sharing there now. Okay, we have questions coming in, and just a reminder to everybody to put your questions in the questions and answers. I suppose a quick one just to clarify, you talked on a number of occasions about Menu B areas. Could you give us a little bit of an explanation of Menu B and I suppose Menu A and the differences between them?
My understanding, Pat, is that areas of let's say greatest concern, areas of high nature value farmland and important river catchments with concentrations of Natura 2000 sites will be contained in a number of Menu B areas, and the farmers in those areas will be supported by local project teams. Menu A, I think, will be a more national scheme that will apply outside of these areas, and will recognise that farmers in the rest of the country have something important to offer as well.
Okay, Catherine, there's a good few questions coming in there.
Yes. First one, if farmers are not, you know, if we don't want them, if the delivery of the agricultural produce is not the main aim, how do you think the scheme will need to deliver to appeal to farmers to change that, you know, food production being the priority to a more mixed target?
Yeah, well, I think food production, and particularly the production of high quality beef and lamb in these areas will always be a valued output from farms. These landscapes were created by agriculture, by the influence of farmers over thousands of years, and maintaining them is going to continue to require farming activity. But it's a type of activity, the delivery of which will have to be adjusted slightly to accommodate the delivery of other outputs. So it's not a case of conservation versus agricultural production, it's a case of integrating the two in a manner that benefits the farmer.
But I suppose even to get them to move away from being food only.
Yeah, there's a big culture shift involved there, and it's a big ask, and it's something that the department and that the people who are involved in the local project teams of the future are going to have to make a real effort to deliver. And to do that, they're going to have to engage with farmers and use leaders within the farming community to sell that message.
Again, back on the mechanisms there, is there any experience of using both action and the results-based models on the same area?
Yeah, well, at the moment, the Hen Harrier Project and the Pearl Mussel Project, they're results-based projects, but they sit on top of GLAS, which is a prescription-based project. So there is experience at the moment. 90% of the farmers in the Hen Harrier Project are also in GLAS. So the two operate hand in hand at the moment, but there are disadvantages to that as well. And one of the disadvantages is that it greatly increases the transaction cost for the farmer. It increases the risk of mixed messages between two different approaches. And it also creates a certain audit risk about double payments. So it's the marrying of the two approaches is something that would require a lot of care.
Fergal, you talked about the role of the advisor and the potential change role of the advisor. Could you give us what your kind of vision for the ongoing role of an advisor throughout the process of an agri-environmental scheme might be?
Well, I think at the moment, the role of the advisor's role is as a service provider to the farmer. So in the context of schemes like GLAS, we have the department, we have the participating farmer, and then on the far side of the farmer, we have the advisor. I think we need to bring the advisor much closer to the center of that relationship. I think we need to have more of a triangular relationship between those parties. And we need to use the knowledge that advisors have built up of farming in the areas that they're active in. We have to look on that knowledge as a resource, and we have to utilize it in the delivery of these programs. And one way I see it doing that is through a concept of local area partnerships. While we might have menu B areas that cover the bulk of a county, we have to bring the interaction with the farmer down to a much smaller level than that. So I see project staff on the local teams perhaps dealing with maybe something in the region of 400 farmers each. And I see them meeting several times a year with a local area partnership consisting of local advisors and local farmer leaders, perhaps MPWS staff based in the area, to identify what the challenges are locally, what the training needs are, and how to deliver those solutions locally, and not to be depending on the top-down delivery for them.
For that to work, is there a need for the schemes to be more dynamic than they would have been in the past? And you talked, I think, a little bit about changes as you went along in the Hen Harrier project.
Yeah, I think one positive note there is that my understanding is that the local project teams are going to be supported under the cooperation regulation, which I think would give a lot more flexibility to how they go about their business than perhaps some of the other regulations would. I know the Hen Harrier Project really benefited from the flexibility that was provided under the EIP regulation. And I think under the cooperation measure, we'll have a similar flexibility to bring, to create new structures at a local level to address these challenges.
Catherine?
Can I come back to just a couple of technical ones there too, on somebody wondering about the altitude range for the Hen Harrier, and a follow-on one there about the habitat value of clear-felled conifer forestry on the peat soils.
Yeah, the altitude of hen harriers, well, most of the Hen Harrier breeding sites are in areas that I would describe as hilly rather than mountainous. In the past, I think there were records of Hen Harriers in the Wicklow Mountains, but today most of them would be in upland, hilly, rather than mountainous areas. So perhaps in the region of 100 or 200 meters above sea level rather than significant mountains. The second question there, Catherine, was in relation...
Was the value of the clear fell forestry for the Hen Harrier.
Look, in the short term, when we get forestry clear fell, we often get an explosion of pioneer plant species that come in and establish in this newly cleared habitat. And they can, in the short term, be very good for supporting insects and for supporting small birds. There are problems with that. One is that under the current system, forest owners are obliged to replant. And in most cases, they're obliged to replant within 2 years. So the short-term benefit that's provided by recent clearfell is just that, short-lived. And the replanting process often, particularly if it's delayed for 2 years or more, the replanting process often involves clearing that vegetation with herbicides, and that reduces its value post planting.
Okay, and Pat, I see another one there about could Fergal comment on the results of the breeding success rate of the Hen Harrier across all the areas where the project is? Are numbers up or down?
Right, okay, the breeding success rate is an interesting metric. One thing I think that's been learned in the Hen Harrier project through our annual monitoring is that breeding success is quite volatile, and that there are good years and there are very poor years. In 2019, we had an exceptionally good year with 81 chicks fledged. Unfortunately, 2021 is going to be a very poor year. I think the number of chicks they're not confirmed yet, and there's still a few active nests, but they're probably going to be in the mid-30s. What are the reasons for this? I think in relation to 2021, probably the dominant reason is the weather conditions in May and early June. I think they were a big drag on breeding success this year, but I think this is a long-lived bird, and it's a bird that in most pairs will get numerous opportunities to breed. And I think perhaps in the past it was underestimated the importance of the occasional very good year like we had in 2019. On the other side of it, if we take a longer term view and look at the number of breeding pairs, we've had an increase in the number of breeding pairs across the SPA network since the project started, particularly in Munster. In the Mulliganish to Mushramore SPA in Cork, I think we had 1 pair in 2017 when we did our baseline study, and we've had 5 pairs this year and 5 pairs last year. So we're very happy with that increase. In the stacks to Mulligararks, West Limerick Hills and Mount Eagle, which is the largest SPA, the number of breeding pairs in our first year I think was 27, and again it's not confirmed yet, but it's looking like it'll be around 34 this year. So that's quite a substantial increase. In the other SPAs, in the Slieve Octies, that SPA, the population has been in a long-term decline since the SPA was designated, but it's been stable at I accept a much reduced level for the last 3 years. And while it's not confirmed yet, there is a possibility that we might have a slight increase this year. And if that's true, that will be hopefully be a turning point in the fortune of the species in that SPA. The other 2 SPAs then, the other 3, the Slieve Phalums and Silvermines, I suppose in common with the Slieve Blooms, the population continued to rise after designation, but has settled at a lower level since about 2015, 2016. Slieve Bay is a difficult one because it's a small site adjacent to a much larger area in Northern Ireland, and the numbers are influenced very much just by birds moving over and back across the border. So it's difficult to look at in isolation. So overall, a lot of volatility in chick numbers from year to year, but we're happy with the improvement in the number of breeding pairs. But we believe we can do a lot better.
Question here in relation to contribution to, I suppose, the overall science. You're collecting a lot of data. You're building up a lot of knowledge between advisors and your project team. How is that being brought into, if you want, the scientific body of work, or to what degree are you engaging in production of papers or a more science-based approach?
Well, we're supporting two PhD candidates, one in both in GMIT under Dr. James Moran. One of them is a staff member who's doing a PhD in his spare time, and the project gives him study leave to support that. And the other is a full-time student that the project supports both technically and financially. We're also involved with UCD in relation to utilizing our data in relation to a track and trace project for conventional agricultural production.
There's a question there around the EIPs were brought in the last CAP reform, and there was the 3 big ones and then a number of smaller ones. Have you any comment in relation to how you feel that process has added to our ability to move forward with agri-environmental measures?
I think it was the introduction of or the utilization of the EIP model particularly for the large scale projects was a very brave move by the department at the time. It was very innovative, and it was almost unique in Europe. I think elsewhere the EIP model was used for shorter term, more discrete, generally technical related challenges. I think Ireland was the only one to use it for large-scale approaches to agri-environment challenges. I think it was, as I said, a brave move and a far-seeing move, and I think it's done a lot to demonstrate that this approach is feasible at a large scale. We've had pioneers in this area like Brendan Dunford and Sharon Parr in the Burren project, but they were constrained by budget and by geography and dealt with 300 or 400 farmers, and we needed to go a step beyond that to demonstrate that approach was deliverable, was practical for thousands of farmers. And I think in hindsight, that's probably the most important achievement that the Hen Harrier Project has had, and I would hope that the lessons that we've learned will inform the rollout of these Menu B project teams.
There's a question there. Can you give an example of how the Hen Harrier Project benefit from the flexibility allowed, that you're allowed to change the methodologies as you go along?
Yeah, well, one feature of mainstream agri-environment schemes is that the rules are fixed. They're fixed at the very beginning, and change midstream or the ability for adaptive management is quite constrained. And I think that wouldn't have suited, it wouldn't have been viable for a project like the Hen Harrier Project, where we had to be able to learn from our mistakes, and where we had to be able to adapt to changing circumstances and to changing opportunities. So I think the flexibility of the EIP model was absolutely essential. I don't think what we've done and what the Freshwater Pearl Mussel Project have done and what some of the smaller EIPs have done would have been feasible under any other regulatory measure.
Catherine?
Yeah, I have a few there relating to back to the you spoke of a managed retreat from forestry, and I suppose are you talking about new plantings there, or maybe a change in the replanting option? And then I have a couple of follow-on ones. But
Forestry, look, is a very contentious issue, and it's not for me to determine what forestry policy should be, but there are things that can be done to mitigate the impact of forestry on upland habitats. You know, like it or not, it's now a shared landscape. It's a landscape that agriculture has to share with forestry. But as I said, there are things that can be done. And one of the most important of those is to look at consolidating the shape of forestry plantations to reduce the length of that interface with open terrain. And that might, in some areas, some parts of some plantations, it might require early felling, and it might require the replacement of those felled trees with either a more open habitat or with broad-leaved woodland. So
that was one of the questions. Would a strategic broadleaf planting support? You know, it may support a more resilient landscape, but what about the Hen Harrier for the broadleaves?
Yeah, well, you know, I said earlier about having the right animal in the right place. Well, I think you can say the same about the tree. You know, the right tree in the right place. So broadleaves have an important role. And while Hen Harriers mightn't be, you know, they're not a forest nesting species. You know, they don't nest in broadleaved woodlands either. Scrub habitats are very important to them. But woodlands, broadleaf woodlands are also very important to many of the birds and animals that the Hen Harrier preys on. So to the extent that they contribute to ecosystem functionality and again, a prey base that the Hen Harrier can exploit, then they are potentially very useful.
Okay, for the and just one final one there on the forestry, the you know the belief that young plantations provide good nesting sites for them. I know you touched on it before, but just a comment you know on that.
Well, I think, you know, Hen Harriers do nest in young plantations. There's no doubt about that. But to a large extent, that's because of the lack of suitable or more suitable habitats elsewhere. You know, the highest success rate of for Hen Harrier nests is in patches of scrub and in tall heather, particularly where they're remote from forestry. The big danger with Hen Harriers choosing to nest in young forestry is that it can act as an ecological trap, and that the failure rate of those nests from predation tends to be much higher than those that nest in more traditional settings. So yes, they are used by Hen Harriers, but that's not necessarily a positive development.
When you talk about predation, what are the key predators that cause problems?
Foxes, pine marten, other birds, grey crows, occasionally even other birds of prey. Look, predation is a normal. It's a normal event. You know, that's the Hen Harrier itself preys on meadow pipits and skylarks. So a certain amount of losses to predation can be expected. The problem is where those losses become unsustainable. And very often that's because of a change in the structure of the landscape and the habitats. So, you know, we have to look at, you know, at addressing that of bringing predation losses down below that sustainable level.
We have a couple of questions. You talked both about a partnership approach and a landscape approach. And there's a couple of questions on both in relation to who should take a lead on this and how that leadership should manifest itself.
Right. Well, when we talk about a landscape approach, we're talking about, you know, bringing our focus beyond the individual farm. Obviously, we have to consider the opportunities that exist on the individual farm, but we have to see them in the context of the larger landscape. So when we talk about a partnership approach, we have a lot of stakeholders involved in our uplands. You know, we have the farmers who manage the agricultural component of that. We we have the forestry industry, we have various regulatory bodies from local authorities all the way up to the EPA, MPWS, and then of course the Department of Agriculture, who are the managing authority for programs like this. So all of them have to be involved in one way or another. And I think particularly in the development of local area plans, which I think are an essential precursor to this, that all of those stakeholders should be involved. And then in the operational phase, I think we have to continue to maintain that local partnership level, and to identify and address local problems.
Okay, Catherine.
Just wanted to have you come. What's the area of land for one pair of breeding birds? Is there kind of a?
It varies a lot. Look, ideally, with a lot of territorial birds and animals, the more productive the territory, the smaller it tends to be. Unfortunately, in the Hen Harrier SPAs, large areas aren't that productive at all, and the birds, particularly the males, have to roam over quite large areas to get the prey that they require. We have had incidents where nests have been as close as 100 meters from each other. We have one or two areas that have exceptional densities of Hen Harrier nests, and I think we have to learn from those areas to see why those landscapes are so productive, and is there lessons there that we could bring to other much less productive sites. So no real answer for the questioner there, but there is a lot of variety out there.
A question in relation to, I suppose, what's ahead for advisors if we get an expansion to the 8 local support teams that we talked about, and a broadening of the area in menu B from the EIPs. Will that mean a very significant change for advisors, and what are going to be the main elements of that change?
Well, I think in the past, we've unfortunately developed into a model where the advisor's role has largely been one of facilitating applications for programs, about managing a farmer's application and for schemes, and about dealing with any hiccups or challenges that the farmer has in their relationship with the department. And frankly, that's not good enough. What we need to do is we need to bring the advisor out of that role, out of the application process, and bring them into the field and give them a problem-solving role. They should be there to assist the farmer to do better, not to manage administrative functions in relation to scheme applications. So I think it's a huge change for advisors, and it is going to need a big investment and an ongoing investment. Not just when I say investment, not necessarily talking about a huge amount of money, but a huge amount of focus on upskilling advisors and providing them with opportunities to develop their skills and to develop their capacity in this area.
Okay, I think we've run out of time. I think really enlightening, really challenging talk in terms of where we need to go to do things right. I think congratulations to you and your team for the work you've put in, and anyone who's an innovator has to make the mistakes and figure out ways, and I think there's been a huge degree of success there in doing that. So congratulations on that, and I'm sure you're going to be playing a major role in what's coming down the line. So thank you very much for your time this morning and for your sharing with us your thoughts.
Thanks for that, Pat. And I can assure you there was a huge amount of mistakes. I hope that we've learned from some of them, and that the people who come after us will have the benefit of not having to learn by their own mistakes. So if we can do that, it'll be a job well done, you know. So
thanks very much. Just to say that the webinar today is brought to you in association with our partners on this process, Dairy Sustainability Ireland, the National Rural Network, and Food Drink Ireland. And as always, I'd like to express our thanks to our production team of Yvonne Marr and Andy Boland. And next week, we're joined by Sarah Vera from Waterford Institute of Technology, and she was formerly a member of the Agricultural Catchments Programme, talking to us on managing nutrient runoff from farmyards. So thanks very much, and thanks again, Fergal and Catherine.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
You've been listening to the podcast version of the Teagasc Signpost Series, the weekly webinar that promotes and examines sustainability in Irish farming. Don't forget to join us live every Friday morning for our latest webinar. For more, visit teagasc.ie. And you can also rate, review, and subscribe to the Signpost Series on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from. I'm Mark Gibson, and thanks for listening.